Anastasia, remind me what we talked about last week. I can't remember.
Yes, sure, Venerable. So last week, 2 previous weeks, we talked about the importance of thinking of impermanence.
Okay.
Then we talked about karma. Then also we talked about helping others in a way that we help ourselves, that we have a virtue in our mind, and our mind will be peaceful at the moment of death. And we also talked about the circumstances for the last moment of the death.
Good. Okay. Great.
And so we haven't talked about death process, and also we haven't talked about how to help after death.
So I thought we did last week. We talked about the death process. No, I described the different elements.
Not totally. You said not totally.
Where do we end? Doesn't matter. I'll go through the whole thing again. It's okay. And we'll talk about how to help out. We have 2 more talks, right? Today and next time. Yeah. Okay, good. Thanks. All right. Hi, everybody. All here.
Shall we start with prayers?
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. Happy to see you all. Diana, as usual, my precious Russian voice, without whom I would be completely just making stupid sounds out of my mouth. So I'm glad Diana is there to save me. Okay. So as always, we start with our prayer, which is stating our reliance on the Buddha and his teachings, and then our motivation, our goal for being together to listen to these teachings, which is the long-term goal. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama always says, always aspire to do what is most beneficial. And if we can, long-term better than short-term. So of course, long-term is our own Buddhahood. No matter how many lifetimes in the future, it doesn't matter. That's our goal. So for this reason, so we can become a Buddha, so we can benefit others, this is why we're sitting here together, thinking like that. And our little prayer expresses that. So I think it'd be good to say, I'll sing it one time in Tibetan, 2 times in Tibetan, and then you can say it in Russian. So say it in Russian first. Russian first.
В Будде, Дхарме и Высшем Собрании ищу прибежище вплоть до просветления, силу заслуг от практики даяния других парамид, достанную Буддой на благо всех существ.
Sangye charang soke chognam la jancho badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chönyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drapashok Sangye charang soke chognam la jancho badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chönyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drapashok Sangye charang soke chognam la Jangcho baru dagni kyab suchi Dagi chönyen gipe sonam ki Drola penche sangye drupasho. All right. So far this series of talks we're discussing how to live our lives in the framework of impermanence and death. And then how to die well. And then, but more broadly, Lama Zopa Rinpoche's book, it's advice for everybody, but it's the way it's written, it's addressed to how we can help other people die well. Of course, our loved ones, but that includes the mouse, the ant, the dog, the pussycat, your baby, all beings. There's so, in other words, from the Buddha's perspective, there are so many ways that we can help a person die well. So that's an interesting topic, because like these days, in the modern world, I'm so moved by it. There's so much more talk in all the different countries, and maybe it's in Russia too, I don't know, but the hospice movement, helping people die. So of course, it's not always from the religious point of view. I mean, I remember in Australia, I went to 2 different conferences. One was a conference in a hospital in Sydney, and it was a doctor who works with sick and dying children. Now that's really scary for most people. It's the most painful one, isn't it? And of course, it was nothing to do with religion, nothing to do about future lives. It was all about how to help people face the reality of death, don't be afraid of death, how to make it more human, how to make the parents feel better, because there's so much fear around the death of children. And it was a wonderful conference, and I was so moved by the doctor. He just had this really humanitarian approach and wanted to make people recognize the reality of death. This is something that's really big, and I remember it was so moving that the morgue for the children, for the dead children in the hospital. He had it decorated like a nursery, and it was open, and the little brothers and sisters would walk in and out of the morgue, and they'd, one little boy said, "Come and meet my dead brother." I mean, it was so open and so moving, because instead of all the fear that we have about death, not wanting to talk about death, living in denial of death, I mean, it's just crazy. So even in the modern materialist world, it's so moving to see this. And I remember another conference, these wonderful young doctors and nurses actually choosing to work in this profession, to work with the dying. It was very moving. I was very wonderful. And again, but in that case, of course, it's all about for the parents as much as anything else. Of course it is for the parents and the family, to help them get over to deal with their grief and their suffering, and to make it for all the group, to make it a better experience. And of course, for the dying person. But clearly that's all involved here too. But I remember one of my friends, I asked her to, when I was editing Lama Zopa's book, I gave her the manuscript and asked her just to proofread it and to check it, to see if she had any ideas. And she said, "Well, where's the chapter on grief?" But I said, well, that's not the point here. This is not the Buddhist approach. This book is not about the people. This is a really crucial point now. Because this book isn't for people, for the family, how we deal with our pain and our grief. That's a separate issue. In this case, this book is for the benefit of those who are dying. And why? This is the big point. Because if you think of only for the benefit of those who are dying, if you think from the materialist point of view, that seems rather cruel, because as far as the materialist point of view, when the person is dead, they're gone. Why should we think about them? We now have to think about ourselves. And of course we do need to, but that's Buddhist practice. That's part of your practice. And the Buddhist approach anyway is that if you live your own, if you're a helper, or whether you're in the bed or you're the helping the person dying, you living in the framework of impermanence, which is taught in the Lam Rim, this prepares you for death, and you won't have so much pain and suffering and grief and loss when your beloved dies. So this is implicit in this book. But the key point is, and this is the crucial difference in this Buddhist approach, and this is not even in all Buddhist approaches, but in the Tibetan Buddhist approach, which uses the Vajrayana system as the explanation of the actual process, and the broader Buddhist sutra teachings about karma for the explanation of what happens after the person dies. There's nothing like that, of course, in the materialist view, and there might be some teachings in the Jewish teachings or in the Christian teachings or the Muslim teachings, but certainly in the Tibetan Buddhist, they're really extensive. I mean, in this book, there's about, the way we did the book, all Lama Zopa Rinpoche's different practices, and we numbered them and put them all in the back. The advice is in the front, all the things what to do at the different stages, the weeks and months before, the days before, the hours before, at the time the breath stops, at the time the mind leaves, then the 49 days after the mind leaves. There's all this chronological order of different practices to do. Well, obviously during those different stages, you do the medicine Buddha at this stage, and at this stage. So then the practice is in the back, but Rinpoche mentions it in these different stages. So of the 87 practices, I would say at least 20 are what to do after the person dies. So that's the unique approach here, and again, the advice is specifically, it's addressed to how to help our loved ones, die well, and therefore, as Lama Zopa puts it, get either a happy human rebirth or a Pure Land rebirth. And this is not, this is a practical issue for the Buddhists. And I'll tell you, when I was editing this book, I mean, I'm a Buddhist, like all of us, some of us, and I was, Buddha's teachings about impermanence really well. You learn it in the Lam Rim. You try to think about it. You learn about the death process. If you do your tantric sadhana, you incorporate the death process. And I want to discuss that today as well. There's a very special chapter in the book called "Death is What the Yogis Have Been Waiting For." And so it's Lama Zopa explaining. Did we do this one? Did we discuss this yet, Anastasia? Do you remember? Do you remember, Anastasia? I'm sorry, I should remember, but I have to ask.
Yes, we touched it a little bit.
We did. Thank you very much. Okay, so we might look at that again. But I didn't read from Lama Zopa's chapter, did I? I didn't read the entire chapter about the sadhanas and how they're organized and how we combine them with the death process. Do you remember that? No. I mean, if any of you got highest yoga tantra empowerment, it's really important you understand this. So I think I'll read from Lama Zopa's book. And does Diana have the book in Russian, Anastasia? Good. I'll tell her the chapter, and then when we do it, Diana, you can just read it out in Russian, and I will read it out in English, but we'll check that we've got the correct chapter between us. So anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, so this is a very unique approach. And this is the point, as Lama Zopa says at the very beginning, we have him saying at the very beginning, this is the point of the entire book. He said, I've said this many times, if you want to help your loved one throughout their life, then the time they need you most is when they are dying. This is, of course, from the materialist point of view, this is a big shock. This is a big surprise. What do you mean? They're dead already. What's the point? Because this is the point. When we understand karma, this makes a lot of sense. So the more we understand karma, and we have talked about it, the more we understand the process of karma and how it works, this point makes sense. Otherwise, it just sounds weird, So the logic, of course, is that our mind, again, the big picture of karma, this big view in Buddhism, this kind of the Buddhist world view, there are trillions and trillions of consciousnesses, of minds, mind streams, mental continuums, millions of sentient beings, the English term for the term sem chen. The direct translation, I think, is very delicious. I think it's better than the English one. I don't know what you say in Russian, but it's mind possessor. It's a really good term. It's very direct, So there's trillions of them, not just humans. You've got a whole spectrum of possibilities of types of rebirth, as far as Buddha's view of the universe is concerned. All of those in samsara, all the way from, the beings in the subtlest levels of deepest concentration. This is from the Hindu tradition. Those in the deepest absorption called the formless realm, then the form realm, then the desire realm. And then within the desire realm, it's like 6 suburbs from the most delicious, the God realms, to the most intense suffering called the hell realms. These are real, actual mental experiences of real sentient beings. Trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions. Number one point. Number two, why do they have these experiences? Because we create them ourselves. This is the biggest shock to hear when we hear about the Buddha's view of karma, because he doesn't posit a creator. We know that. He doesn't say we come from our parents. They give us a body. The worm baby gets a body from its mummy and daddy worm. The lion gets its body from its mummy and daddy lion. We get our body, but hey, people, we do not get our mind. Our mind goes into that body from before. So given this is that we're going from life to life to life, driven by this natural law, not somebody up there punishing. There's no judge at the end of life who decides you're good or bad and sends you here and there, which is the kind of cliched view we have about a creator. No such concept in Buddhism, no such concept. And equally, it's not a random event. That would be pretty scary, but we think actually, even if we think we're very scientific in the materialist world, we're we're very superstitious. We do not have answers for many, 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 many things. So mostly we don't know why things happen. I don't, why I didn't ask to get born. It's not my fault. We don't know why good things happen. We don't know why bad things happen. We mostly, in fact, just think everything is good luck and bad luck. This is just incredibly superstitious. It's very ignorant. It's like you've never heard of botany. No one on the whole planet has ever heard of the natural law of botany. So you just never know why things pop up in the garden every day. And if that happens, of course you'd be scared. You never know what's going to happen. You're scared. That's how we live our lives. We never know what's going to happen because we have no view about why things happen. Or equally, it's an interesting point, actually. The Christian view, the Muslim view, I think that's a better view philosophically. It's very interesting. Hear my point here. I'm not criticizing fundamental, scientific people. There's brilliant thinkers. Please hear my point. But at least, you see, with the materialist view, we have, with scientists, we haven't yet discovered the answer to all these questions. That's true. We know that. We accept that. We haven't discovered it yet. Now, if I'm a Christian or a Muslim, 100% having faith in the Creator, I wouldn't have fear. If you never, as a materialist, because we don't know why things happen. So many things. We just think it's good luck, So we never know. So if you never know why things happen, if you never know why things are popping up in your garden, you'd always be scared because you never know what's going to happen. You'd be living in fear, anticipation of good things and fear of the bad things. Well, that's how we live our lives. living in fear. But what if you're a Christian or a Muslim and 100% faith? You would not have that kind of fear. Why not? Because at least somebody knows what's going on, and it's called God. I'm not being sarcastic. God has a plan. God is the creator after all. God knows exactly what's going on. God knows all the minds of all beings because he created them all. He's got a plan for every one of them. I think that's just an amazing view. I think that's a superior view philosophically in terms of how to have a happy life. Please hear my point. I'm not criticizing science and all the discoveries. I'm not saying that. But in terms of a view that enables you to have a happy life, I think it's a pretty good view. You have faith in God. Like I remember this years ago in Malaysia, one plane crashed and all the people died. And this mummy and daddy, Malaysian, they were Muslim, they were asked, how do you feel about the death of your daughter? They said, we are peaceful. She belongs to God and he has taken her back. I think that's incredible. I don't agree with it, but at least they were happy. They were screaming and yelling and wanting to sue the airline and having mental breakdowns. Why did our daughter die? That's how most of why we suffer in our lives. If we have a materialist view, we don't know why things happen. Now, if you're a Christian, you don't ask that view. It's God's will. If you're a really serious Christian or Muslim. Now, if you're a Buddhist, you don't ask that question either, because you have the view of karma. That's why they always quote that story, and I'm sure I have told you, these young Tibetan nuns interviewed in New York, invited by Richard Gere, a whole bunch of ex-prisoners came and met the Dalai Lama, and I was invited as well because I worked with people in prison. And these two young women, two young nuns, tortured and sexually abused in prison, so that they weren't angry. And what is anger? Why is this happening to me? What do you think anger means? Because we don't know why things happen. Well, she didn't ask. Those nuns, like the mummy and daddy Muslims, did not have that. They were peaceful. This is too mad for us. We don't get it. Because they have a view, not creator, but the law of karma. So what I'm getting at is, and this is the point in Buddhism, is what Buddha is suggesting. It's an interesting point. That the way the degree to which we are happy or suffering, the key cause of it is what goes on in our mind, meaning our interpretations of things. So what does interpretation of something mean? Well, anger is an interpretation. How dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. That you're going to suffer mightily. If you're that Muslim mummy, we are peaceful. She belongs to God and he's taken her back. That is a viewpoint. That is an interpretation, isn't it? So the interpretation in our mind every second determines whether we're happy or suffering. This is the Buddhist point. That's why we have to become our own therapists. That's why we have to unpack and unravel our mind. And then the Buddha's view is bring it into sync with how things exist. Then the consequence of this, peace, bliss, clarity, joy, happiness, wisdom. It's hard to see that initially because we don't think that we suffer because of what's in our head. We think we suffer because of the mean boyfriend. We think I'm happy because of the kind boyfriend. This is the real interpretation that we have. The Buddha says is a samsaric interpretation. He says, sorry guys, it's just mistaken. So it takes time to see this. So living our lives in the framework of the reality that I am an impermanent thing, one, that I will die, absolutely have no idea when. I could die from this second forward, fact. And third point, what's the point at the time of death? At that point, when my mind leaves the body, and I don't know when it'll be, it could be today. This is the point. At that point, what's important to me? What's useful to me? So if you're a materialist, there is nothing useful to you at the time of death because you totally disappear. If you're a Christian, what's useful to you, similar to the Buddhist one, is your goodness. And you're doing what God's will is, and you'll go straight to God. If you're a Buddhist, what's useful for you is your virtuous imprints in your mind from doing virtuous actions and from refraining from doing negative ones. That's it. So that implies practice. You live your life like this, then as Lama Zopa says in the book, death will be a very joyful experience for you. This is fact, because it won't be shocking, it won't be surprising. You won't live in denial of it. So living your life in terms of in the framework of impermanence, and therefore living a life of ethics, which is the logical conclusion, because you only want to have your virtue to go with you, then you're going to die happy. However you die, you'll be ready for it. Bye-bye. See you next life. You know, you'll be comfortable. Now, most people aren't that ready. That's why we need to help our loved ones at the time of death. We need to help them navigate this experience, you know. That's why it's so important. So that we can help them as well as we can. We can't guarantee it. At least give them a condition, a conducive condition in which a virtuous karmic seed can be triggered, which will then program their mind for the next life. And that is triggered before you even stop breathing. So it's a very technical thing. That's why it's so good to learn. As Lama Zopa says, this is education we all need, you know. Because not just our loved one, it's our mouse, the mouse in the kitchen, the little ant, the fly. You treat them the same way. You say a mantra with a little ant, don't just throw it down the bin. Say mantra, bless your breath, blow on the ant. Put it in a safe place, let it die peacefully. The fly, the mouse, same thing. The deer on the road, you know. Don't just say mantra as you drive by. That doesn't help much. Stop the car. Go over to the deer. Blow mantra in its ear. Lama Zopa carries around this is some of the practices he recommends. You know, one of the things to do is to have, he says, you get talcum powder or small seeds, mustard seeds or things like that. So he said throughout his day, and he's saying all these thousands of mantras, he then blows on that, and that blesses. And that's the logic of that, is that, you know, because you have this subtle wind energy in the body, the subtle wind energy, the prana, which is sound, which is mantra. So when you say mantra, you bless your breath. And then you blow on that seeds, and then he carries a little bag with him. If he sees a bird or something on the side of the road, he'll stop and he'll sprinkle it on the body of the dying. That's one of the things you can do for little animals and things. It blesses them. You say mantras and blow in their ear. I was with Rinpoche in Kathmandu one year, and we were driving on the ring road. If you've been to Kathmandu, you know it's a pretty chaotic road with, you know, 7 lanes of cars. It's chaotic. It's chaotic like Russia, Moscow roads. The difference was, I mean, this is how I say it. Russians drive like a combination of Germans and Indians. So Indians are just easygoing and relaxed and go in every lane they like. No one ever gets upset. Germans are like so efficient you can't believe it and do everything perfectly. Well, Russians are a combination of both. I love Russians. I love Moscow. Haven't been for many years. I must come back soon. And my stupid opinion, okay? Who cares? Anyway, where was I? Oh, yes, in Kathmandu. And we were driving, and Rinpoche, there's 4 of us in the car, and the woman driving, and we're driving on this ring road, and suddenly the woman driving it, you know, I mean, it's got the bulls there and the big trucks and everything. She runs over this little family of baby ducks, mummy duck and baby ducks. And all the mummy and the baby ducks except one all get away. So there we are in the middle of the ring road, standing there with Rinpoche in the middle of the ring road for 30 minutes, with all the cows and the big cars driving by, and he's doing poa. I'll talk about this. One of the practices you can do, you know, transferring the consciousness of this little baby duckling. You could see his little body. His little body was broken, and his little heart was exposed, and you could see his little heart going boom, 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 boom. And Lama Zopa was doing all these prayers and pulling its hair at its crown, you know, doing poa for the little baby duck. I thought, what a lucky duck, you know, having Lama Zopa at the time of its death. What a wonderful way to die. So then we went to the Swayambhu Super, and we started to do our prostrations and got our hand up like this. And Rinpoche starts the motivation for the baby duck. And we're there 30 minutes later, our hands are still on our head. We haven't even done one prostration yet, you know, all these prayers for this baby duck. It was amazing. Anyway, lucky duck, I say. So we can help animals as well. So many things we can do. Okay. So I think we've talked about how to live in according to the, you know, thing. We've talked about impermanence. We've talked about karma, which is so important to understand, because again, repeat, it's about, it's about at the 2nd or 3rd stages of the 8 stages of death, which is the Vajrayana system of what happens at death, that the karmic seed that will determine your next life is triggered. Now, Anastasia said I only began the death process. She thinks I didn't do the whole thing. Is that right, Anastasia? You remember that? Yana, do you remember? I'm sorry. Do you remember, darling? No. Diana? No, I don't remember either. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I tried to listen to last week's video quickly, but I couldn't get it. So maybe we'll go through the death process again. We'll do that slowly. And then we will talk about, how you go through the gradual process of stop breathing, and then what happens after you stop breathing, and then when the mind leaves the body and what to do in that period, and then what to do once the mind has left the body. So I think we'll do that. Does that sound okay, people? I hope so. Good. All right. So the key components again of the key things we need to know about. First, to understand impermanence and how I am impermanent. I will die and I don't know when. So therefore, to be on the alert and not want to waste my precious life, because I do not want a negative seed to be triggered at the time of my death. So therefore, I had better be prepared. And we all know you prepare for everything. If you're going to go for a driving test, you don't say, oh, I'll be okay on the day, and you try to drive on the day. No, you won't be okay. You'll make a mess. You have to start driving now. Okay, so anyway, that's living our lives in the framework of impermanence, which implies, because we know that the seed that will be triggered, we want it to be a good seed, which means a virtuous seed. So I'll get another decent human body or a Pure Land rebirth, and I'll talk about that. Then I better live a good life. That's the conclusion. I better live a good life. I better live according to ethics. Live in my vows, do purification every day, be a nice person, practice Dharma, in other words. Then you'll be ready for death. Then the other one is to know technically the process of death. Okay, so we'll go through it roughly again. If we've done it once, we'll do it again. I can't remember. So it's roughly described in terms of 8 stages. And in fact, it's also divided in terms of 25 various things. These 8 stages consist of these 25 different things that kind of cease to function. It's a bit like sort of the deconstruction of all the components of the person. It's like a breaking down of all these pieces of us. And we can learn to meditate on that process so we can become familiar with it, at least intellectually, throughout our life. So at the time of death, we might even be ready to even recognize some of those stages. The yogis, of course, they can do it easily. They've spent their lives practicing, getting ready for that. We'll discuss that. So these 8 stages are all labeled in terms of a particular type of subtle vision, as they call it, a subtle vision that arises in the mind through each of these 8 stages. So this process is exactly the same as the process of going to sleep. I mean, literally the same. It's the deconstruction of the various components of the person, except, of course, the difference is death is a more radical deconstruction, At the time when you go to sleep, you don't stop breathing, but all your senses cease. And then you go to your dream mind, and then you wake up again. So here, you stop breathing, and then you leave the body and go to the intermediate state, which is like a dream state, and then you wake up in another body, But it's the same process. And that's why the great yogis also can use their sleep as a method of practicing training for this process at the time of death. Okay. So the first stage, various things cease. Each of these stages, various things cease to function. So one group of this 25, divided into these 8, is what they call the 5 wisdoms. It's just these 5 different ways that we function day to day. So the very first one that goes is this ability to hold a lot of information in your mind. Now think about this. I'm sitting there having a chat to my friend Anastasia, and I'm really tired. You know how almost there's various things that occur. This wisdom ceases, your earth element ceases, and the I consciousness cease in this first stage. So all together, this, you feel really, your body feels like lead, isn't it? I'm sitting there in front of her. My eyes, I can hardly keep them open. It's really a struggle, isn't it? And then you can't hold much information. Your mind's really struggling. It's sort of like these energies are beginning to deconstruct, cease to function. We know that experience. So that's 3 things. And then 4, this subtle vision occurs. Something else occurs, but it doesn't matter here. It's called never mind, there's a subtle level of each of these consciousnesses, so forget those. But there's a vision. This vision is called a mirage. So why a mirage? We did mention this last week, I remember it. Mirage is the interplay of earth and water, isn't it? So the earth element is ceasing and the water element is becoming prevalent. So there's a very subtle sign, and that occurs every time we go to sleep. But who remembers it? Nobody, you know. So next stage, the wisdom, this ability to distinguish between pleasure, pain, and indifference. We spend our lives distinguishing very precisely between these three, but these kind of merge, get less distinct. Your ear consciousness begins to cease. Now that we have that experience, I'm sitting upright, my eyes are struggling, I'm trying to listen to Anastasia, and I can't hear what she just said the last 5 seconds. I haven't fallen over yet, but my ears consciousness is ceasing, my eyes are ceasing, my body's getting heavy. These energies are deconstructing, dissolving, as they say. At the same time, in the second stage, the earth water, the water element begins to dry up, the liquids in your body. And then the vision is like this interplay of the fire element and the next one, which is the water element, and the next one, which is fire. So they say it's like smoky. I should read you Lama Zopa's words for it. They're very nice to hear, and it's good imprint for your mind. Let me just get the book. Just nice words describing these visions. It's good to hear his words. The 8 stages of death. Here we go. 47. All right. So Rinpoche says the mirage, it's a bit like the first one. It's a bit like, he says this. Rinpoche says the mirage is have a vision, an inner, like water shimmering in the heat. Your vision blurs. Everything seems watery and wavy, like a mirage in the distance. The next one, the second one, the vision of smoke. You'll have a vision of smoke, like a room filled with incense or smoke from burning green wood swirling about. That's the interplay, isn't it, of fire, the water, and the next one, which is fire. So then now at this point, Rinpoche says, you know, your dying thoughts, it's about this point that you're dying, the karmic seed that will be the one that will determine your next life. So let's just think of us in our past life. This is us now dying in our past life. We could have been a kangaroo. We could have been an ant. It doesn't follow we were a human. So it's about this point in this death process of ours, and it must have been our minds, some reason must have been peaceful. This is the whole point now. At this point, our minds must have been peaceful, not too freaked out. Because that peaceful, the way our mind is at this point is the prevailing condition that triggers the seed. So in our case, we can prove logically that it's a virtuous karmic seed of non-killing was triggered because we got a human body, and that's the cause of a human body. That was triggered before we even stopped breathing, and that's about a few weeks before we found our way to our present mother's human womb. So as Pamonka Rinpoche says, Rinpoche quotes, in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, your dying thoughts activate the karma that will be the cause of your next rebirth. And the activators of this throwing karma, as they call it, are the 8th and 9th links, craving and grasping, which is a description of the 12 links. So let's look at that. So there's 2 processes going on here. One is from the Sutra teachings, the 12 links of dependent arising. And one is the Tantric teachings, which is this 8 stages that we're describing. So the 12 links of dependent arising, they play out every second of the day. It's Buddha's entire teaching of how 1, because of ignorance in the mind, the root delusion. 2, because of that, we create an action. 3, that leaves a seed on the consciousness. 4, that brings this. 5, it brings that. Then it does this. Then it does that. And all the way to the 12, which is old age and death. And we're creating countless cycles of these. It's a very technical explanation. It's very interesting. Every single day, you know, the way our minds are constructed. But as Lama Zopa says in this book, there's a particular way that the 12 links play out at the time of death. And there's a little chapter about that. So at this point, the 8th and the 9th links, which are called craving and grasping, well, they're just 2 different words for attachment. right? Attachment, this whole realm we live in is a realm of attachment. It's driven by attachment. It's created by attachment over countless lifetimes. This body of ours, where'd it come from? What is this body? It's a body of 5 holes that demand feeding, isn't it? The 5 senses. We've created this karmically over many, many lifetimes. That is the product of attachment. This universe we live in, this world we live in, this planet, what is it but a bunch of the 5 sense objects? And we have to ingest them, don't we? Things to smell, taste, touch, hear, and whatever the fifth one is. That's the world out there. Where's it come from? Karmically, we created it over eons of time. Not a creator, not from its own side. This is the Buddhist view, it's karma. So craving, attachment is intensely powerful. So in normal daily life, attachment is always there driving us to find the next thing to make me happy. And it arises as craving. And you think, you first of all, you have this dissatisfaction. Oh God, what's missing? And you go, oh, chocolate cake. And then craving kicks in. And then next one, that's the 8th one. The next one is grasping, which is more powerful attachment, which makes you get up and get the chocolate cake. So craving and grasping have this particular role at the time of death. About this point is when they triggered. And this is why death is so fearful, because it's intense attachment. And attachment has multi-functions. The energetic level of attachment, as we've described, is dissatisfaction. The deep feeling that nothing is enough. I don't get enough. It isn't enough. Not enough money. Not enough this. Not enough intelligence. And then I am not enough. That's the real suffering of dissatisfaction. Lama Zopa says that's the main way we suffer in the West, in the modern world, the world of attachment. So much dissatisfaction, so much pain, never satisfied. That's the deepest level of attachment. The next one, of course, is the hankering to get something, always looking, where is it? And then manipulating to get it, and then anticipating it. We spend most of our lives doing that. Every second, anticipating the next thing, the next cake, the next meal, the next step, move my body from this position to the next one, always anticipating, always trying to get satisfied, every millisecond. So fast, we just think it's normal. So at death, this attachment is pretty powerful because we've died millions of lifetimes. We have suppressed the memory, but the programming in our mind of fear is so primordial. And when this grasping kicks in, the attachment is intense. First of all, the attachment, the 8th one, the 8th link in this, Rinpoche says, it's intensely, one of the functions of attachment is to hold on to what you've got. It's to anticipate it and to get it and then to possess it. Well, that here is the one that's so powerful. To hold on to what? To me. Which part of me? The body. That's what we think of as me. This is me. So this is the primordial attachment for this, unable to bear to think of not having or being me. It's just completely primordial. And then grasping then becomes even more powerful. And that when that kicks in, that triggers the number 2 link, which is called karma. That kind of like it's like putting your ATM card into the machine, and then you put your password in, and out comes the money. Well, that's this. This grasping is like the trigger that triggers the karmic seed in our bank vault of billions of karmic seeds that will be the one that will determine our next life. So in our case, we can deduce we must have been relatively peaceful. Even when the grasping comes, grasping is intense, but still we must have been relatively peaceful. And like a miracle, if you like, that grasping was the trigger, the catalyst, and then a virtuous karmic seed of non-killing from 57 lifetimes ago, whatever, was then triggered, which at that moment programmed us right there to go to our present, me in my case, my present mummy's human womb in Melbourne, Australia, when she hopped into her bed with her daddy a few weeks later. Not yet. She's probably, she hasn't even thought of me yet, but I've already programmed to go to their place, to their womb, to their body. We create that. They don't make us. They just hop into bed and have sex and we come running, We create the cause. We've got this intense history with each other. This was triggered before we even stopped breathing. This is the reason, as Rinpoche says, why people need to be helped to die peacefully. Because if they die peacefully, it can trigger a virtuous seed. If they're freaking out, like most beings in the universe die with fear. I mean, all the animals die with fear, pretty certain. Most humans die with fear. So it's going to trigger a negative seed, isn't it? That's why this entire book is written. That's the point. This is the point. Right here. And that's about now, after your breath stops, after your ears begin to go. And this is where they haven't totally gone yet. And this is why when you've still got this is when you can really be helping the person as this process starts. You can be saying prayers, hearing mantras, hearing your gurus giving teachings. These are the things that can, if you're a Buddhist friend dying, can help the person navigate this period. Give them something to hold on to, something useful. This is the point, to stop to calm the fear. So as Rinpoche says at this point, it's so important to control the arising of the delusions, So if it's Christian, you tell your mummy that God loves you. Tell her that heaven is wonderful, that it's so nice to be in heaven. Relax, mummy. Heaven is so delicious. You'll love heaven. That'll help her relax, be calm, and that'll help her mind be peaceful, which will help her virtuous karmic seed be triggered, You help the animals be peaceful, the mouse, the dog. Don't just drug them out of their brains. That's not helpful. The more conscious that mouse or the cat or the ant or your mummy can be, the better. So they say, once that seed has been triggered, then if it's a virtuous seed, and in our case, it was, because here we are, we've got the result, a human, then the death from there on is a very peaceful experience. Because your mind, the mind is going from gross consciousness to the more subtle consciousness to very subtle consciousness in these 8 stages. So as the ears go, the eyes go, the gross senses go, we're moving towards, if you like, our subtle consciousness. That's why many people who have very vivid dreams, sometimes you can have dreams, you're going in and out from consciousness to dreams, you almost can't tell the difference because that's your subtle consciousness. And sometimes you can have very vivid experiences of the subtle consciousness. That's why people can have clairvoyant experiences in dreams, because that's their subtle consciousness. And when people in this life, and often they're not trained and they don't know why they have these experiences, but people all over the world have these clairvoyant experiences. They've got access to their subtle mind, but they don't remember. It's from past meditating, actually, in a past life, but nobody knows that. And nobody has techniques to become more clairvoyant. I mean, Buddha has, they're all here. So as our grosser consciousness is ceasing, you're moving towards the more subtle, and your more subtle mind is much more powerful. It's got the capacity to see things that the gross one can't, which is like your future life, for example. So if virtuous karmic seed is triggered, then your death is a very joyful experience. You die very blissfully because you're moving towards a very blissful, a happy rebirth. Or, a Pure Land rebirth, a human birth or a Pure Land rebirth. I mentioned, my friend, an Australian guy, back years ago in Vajrapani Institute in California, fell off the roof and is dying in the arms of his wife. And she said he was blissful. His face was blissful. I told the story about Steve Jobs, I'm sure. Did I tell the story about Steve Jobs dying? Does anyone remember? I'll have to tell you again then, okay. I might have said it, but I love this story. I love Steve Jobs. Anyway, I love this story, the Apple guy, So he knew he was dying, actually. He had cancer for several years. And I remember reading the memoir of one of his daughters from his first marriage. And she talked about how she went to visit her daddy one day. He was sick, and there was this Tibetan monk there. And it's actually a friend of mine in San Francisco. He's Brazilian. And he's been recognized by Lati Rinpoche as a reincarnated Lama. So he's a Rinpoche and he's a healer. And he was there. That made me very happy to know at least Steve had some connection, with the holy beings. So anyway, the day he died, I love this story. The day he died, his sister was there. They'd been separated since they were little children. They were given away at birth, I think, and they met later. So she told the story. She got there the day he was dying. He died, and he had cancer of the liver or something. I don't know what it was. And his 2 daughters were there, and his wife. And it was a very vivid experience the way she described it. So pretend that I'm the sister, and Steve is like in front of me, but I can see his face. But in between us, his 2 daughters are there. I'm sure I told you the story. His 2 daughters are there, and they're facing Steve. So I'm seeing the backs of their heads, and I'm watching Steve. I'm the sister. And she said his face was radiant. He was looking at his daughters with incredible love. begging them to forgive him for having to leave them. So he wasn't, in other words, he wasn't full of attachment and frantic and fear and grasping, very joyful, very loving. And then she said, he looked over their shoulder into the distance. I did tell you this story. He looked over the shoulder of the daughters into the distance, and she saw him, and he went, oh, wow, oh, wow, oh, wow. And then he died. He fell down and he died. Well, we can deduce from this is the logic of it, that he was suddenly, the process started very quickly. And he's moving towards his subtle mind. Virtue has come, that incredible love in his heart. That was the grasping kicked in, that triggered a virtuous karmic seed for a perpetuum in rebirth or a pure land birth. And so because that was triggered, and then suddenly the process started very quickly, and he's seeing it coming. So he's blissed out, and then he lies down and dies. I think that's a great story. I love that story. That's the way to die, peacefully, so a virtuous seed can be triggered. It's a technical point. It's the same thing. If you want to run across the freeway with 65 lanes of cars all driving fast, you can't afford to be having a panic attack. You've got to be peaceful. Then your mind is sensible and you can be navigated. Well, death is a terrifying experience for most people, because we never thought about it. We lived in denial of it. And the main reason of fear of death, as Rumi says, is this intense attachment growing. For what? Not even for your loved ones, for you, for the body. So primordial. Now, this is why, as Rumi says in the book, and this is so helpful, attachment is attachment is attachment, okay? Attachment is the cause of suffering, but we can use it. So, for example, he said, like at this point, when the function of attachment is to grasp and hold on, which is a disaster. You can't use that. So what can you use? Well, that's why for a Buddhist, for example, in one of the chapters, one of the types of the different chapters for the kinds of practices Rinpoche recommends, or the whole series, the first one is, all the things you can do. This is the weeks and months before death, all the things you can touch, like, mantras and blessing strings and prayer wheels, the things you can hear, different mantras and prayers, the things you can meditate on, that all these different chapters are different practices you can do or help your loved one do. So one of the practices, is to think about, if you're a Buddhist, think about what to think about. Think about your guru. If you're a Christian, think about God. So there's your mummy. She loves God, but she's worried and lying there all anxious and guilty. You don't tell her, think of God, mummy. You just tell her, mummy, God loves you. And then you talk about heaven. Heaven is so beautiful, mummy. You're going to meet your friends. That you say these things to her. So this is the point. Instead of clinging to this one, she's looking forward to that one, and that will help her mind be peaceful. It's very sensible. It's very practical. So if you're a Buddhist, you look forward to a perfect human rebirth. You look forward to Amitabha's Pure Land, which I'll talk about. So that you're using your attachment, but in a wise way, to look forward to something, and that can relax your mind and let go of this one so you can move forward. It's just skillful means, very wise. This is why you've got to know how to help your loved one. You've got to know what they're experiencing, what they're feeling, what they're like, what is best for them. So this is about the second, at this point, when your ears are still functioning roughly and you're a little bit okay, you're managing, this is when you need to hear the advice, hear about your guru, hear your practices, all this advice, look forward to whatever. This is when you need to hear. And then by this point, then you stop hearing, at the gross level anyway. So now the third stage, the vision of sparks. So the first wisdom to go, this next wisdom to go, you can't even discriminate any longer between friends and enemies and strangers. You're gradually losing the plot. You can't distinguish from friends, enemies, and strangers. Kind of all merge, You see your ugly old boyfriend your old ugly uncle on the left, and there's your beloved boyfriend on the right, and you can't tell the difference. And then at the same time, the heat in your body ceases, your nose consciousness ceases, your ability to smell these things. And then this vision of fire sparks, like the sparks that come when you burn dry grass, or like starlight, or a sky filled with fireflies. So now the heat is leaving the body. And this is very interesting because this process of deconstruction, this process of dissolution, is it goes from the crown down, everything goes down to the heart chakra, or from the feet up to the heart chakra. So this is interesting. If you notice, okay, the way the heat leaves the body can be an indicator of the type of rebirth your loved one will get, because already the karmic seed has been triggered in the third stage and the second stage. So here, if the heat leaves the feet first and you're still toasty and warm on the head, that's a good sign. That means you're looking like you're going to be getting a human body or a Pure Land rebirth. But if your feet stay all warm and your head is cold, that's a bad sign. I don't know what you can do about it. I mean, you can't do much, but it's just this saying. It's an indication, So when if a negative thought is triggered before this, then your heat will leave the head first, and that's not cool. So now the fourth one. By this point, your eyes have gone, your ears have gone, your nose has gone, your ability to distinguish many things, your ability to distinguish between pleasure, pain, and indifference, the ability to distinguish between enemies, friends, and strangers. You're gradually ceasing. Your bits of you are falling away, basically. All the energies are dissolving. So now the fourth one is, now you no longer even know who you are. You hear words, you can't put any meaning. You can't put any thoughts together now. You've lost the plot. Can't think of anything. You can't any longer move your body, Your tongue consciousness ceases. And this tongue apparently turns blue at the root and very short. And Geshe Rabton, I always quote this, Lama Zopa Yeshe's teacher and one of my teachers, he said that tongue that has spent its life gossiping is now useless. And then your tactile consciousness ceases as well. So now the vision is like of a flame. But as Lama Zopa says, actually, according to Song Rinpoche, it's more like the light around the flame, a candle flame, just before it goes out, like a dim red-blue light. This happens every time you go to sleep. But who's conscious of it? Nobody, So this is what the yogis have to become familiar with. They use their sleep in their meditation. And I'm going to explain why when we get there, So now the outer breath has stopped, as they say, and the 5 senses have stopped. So that, of course, is now what the world calls death. But you're not dead yet. This is so clear from this Buddhist Vajrayana model. So now, subtle consciousness. So if in relation to sleep, this is when you would, literally in the sleep, you'd go through the 8 stages in a reverse direction, and you'd wake up into a dream state. It's like a subtler level of reality. And this is your subtle mind. The dream state is your subtle consciousness. Your senses aren't existing. But what's interesting about this, when all the people have out-of-body experiences, or they do what they call astral travel, it feels like, people can hear things. Like in this book I'm sure I mentioned the book by this American medical journalist called Nick Teresi, called The Undead. It's not about zombies. It's all his own experience from his research in the United States about the different medical professions in the different states, the contradictions and problems and troubles they're having now about exactly when death is. And all of this is occurring, and I'm sure I mentioned this, around the whole business of taking people's organs. So he's very critical about the industry, because he said it's a marvelous thing to do. All the lamas praise anybody who wants to give their organs, There's a chapter in the book, and we'll discuss this. But he's quite cynical at the arrogance and the elitism of the profession, the way they manipulate people to give the organs of their people. And even now, I've heard in Europe, many countries now have made it a law from this industry pushing it, that it is the law that you will give your organs at the time of death. You have to consciously say you don't want to give your organs. It's so wicked, in my opinion. Okay. So this is a real problem. In the later part of the book, after you get to the point where you stop breathing, And then once you stop breathing, then there's a whole series of chapters. What to do if your loved one dies at home? What to do if your loved one dies in hospital or an institution? What to do if your loved one dies suddenly? What to do if your loved one gives their organs? These different scenarios. The practices are all the same. It's just that sometimes you might have 3 days to do them and maybe only 30 minutes. So as long as we know minimum what to do, we'll know how to navigate the situation, especially if you're in a hospital where you've got no power, you know. So especially the one too about giving your organs. Did we discuss this one, Anastasia? No. Do you remember? Gianna? We did discuss it. We did discuss it. We talked about the heart monitor going from 100 to 200 beats a minute. I wish I remembered. I'm so sorry. Okay, never mind. I might just mention it again. Well, people can ask questions anyway. So anyway, by this point, you've stopped breathing. And from this point, from the Vajrayana point of view, you are not dead yet. And this is now ideal scenario to die. The ideal scenario for the purpose of the person, not your convenience, but for the best for them, is to be in a place like at home, where you can have the room beautiful. You can have it like a shrine room for the 3 whole days. People come in and out and do prayers. You could do it 24 hours a day. That's what they do in the monasteries, if you can do that. That's the best scenario. Best, totally peaceful, like a holy place. So that's the best. And you can keep for 3 days, you know. And then, so we'll go into that in a minute. So meanwhile, the stages of death, you've got to the 4th now. The grosser level has ceased. In Vajrayana model, you've got gross consciousness, subtle consciousness. These are technical terms. And then extremely subtle consciousness. Or that's also called clear light consciousness. Then that gross consciousness is inextricably linked to this gross here, this bag of bones. This is the gross body. So that's what we mean by death, obviously, in the modern world, because we don't posit any subtler levels of consciousness. Of course not. So then you've got subtle consciousness, which is all your mental states. They're called subtle. We can access them through our body, through our mental consciousness at a very gross level, but they are in their nature subtle consciousness. So they gradually, over that process, the next 4 stages, they gradually cease bit by bit. And there's very detailed descriptions of them, you know, in some texts. So at the same time, this is now, I'm sure we talked about this, the construction of the subtle physical energy, the subtle body, as they call it, and the subtle mind. The subtle body consists of 72,000 a subtle nervous system, 72,000 subtle channels throughout the entire body. Going through those channels are all these different wind energies, or prana, or air, prana in Sanskrit. And this is the basis of Tibetan medical system, similar to the Ayurvedic system, similar to the Chinese system. And they study for 12, 14 years, all these different wind energies, this subtle physical energy. And this is the interesting point in the Vajrayana. All our different states of mind, like love and compassion and anger and jealousy, all the parts of our mind, all these conceptual states are linked inextricably to these wind energies, all coursing through this entire nervous system. So our mind's running through our body. This is clearly not the same as neuroscience, quite different. Okay. The third component of our subtle body, got the winds, you've got the channels, and then also the channels, these channels, they're constricted at various points, and they're called chakras, wheels. And there's nothing fancy about chakras. They're hassle. We want to unblock those channels. So the wind energies can all go into the central channel, and I'll explain why as we go along. So there's chakras here, a constriction of channels here, at the heart, below the navel, and then 3 at the end of the central channel, goes all the way to the tip of the penis for the boys and the cervix for the girls. And these last 3 chakras, 3 on the penis and then 3 inside. They're called secret chakras, different constrictions of channels. Okay, so now the other component of the subtle body is called the red and the white kundalini. This is this subtle liquid energy. And it predominates, and this subtle tigle they call in Tibetan, which means drop. The subtle one, the white one, predominates at the crown chakra, and that's the basis of the ability of our human body to experience bliss, joy, happy feelings. And then the red Kundalini is predominating at the heart, at the navel chakra, and that's the basis of our ability to experience heat in the body. So again, this is all part of health, you know. So anyway, this red and white Kundalini, at the time of conception, in our mummy's fallopian tube or wherever they join, I don't know, our very subtle consciousness from the past life, when mummy and daddy hop into bed, or wherever they hop, or whatever happens. These days with the Petri dish, I don't know how they explain it. It's all different now. But if it's just an old-fashioned way you get conceived in your mummy's fallopian tube, the egg and the sperm, when your consciousness comes from the past life, from the bardo, we'll describe all this, it runs like a magnet and joins, yes, that egg and sperm. But what it actually joins is a subtle red and white drop, a subtle physical energy of the sperm and the egg, and that's called the red and the white drop. And your very subtle consciousness enters into that, and it starts, and that's the beginning of you. And it starts at the heart chakra, and then throughout the time, the development of your fetus, you grow up and you grow down, and the whole body grows. And the death process is this gradual deconstruction from the top to the bottom of all these components, and everything ends up at the heart chakra. We're not there yet. We've got 3 stages to go, but that's the indestructible drop, like a tiny bean, and they've got a red top and a white part, you know, and our very subtle consciousness is residing there. And so anyway, we go through the subtle level. The next sign, as Lama Zopa says, the white vision, various states of our mental consciousness cease to function. And then the wind in the right and the left channels, you've got all these channels, and you've got the central channel and all the thousands of other ones. The central channel goes from the crown all the way down to the penis. And then you've got the 2 side channels from here and go up and then all the way down again, ending at the penis or the cervix. So these are the central channel, the 2 side channels, and then all the other thousands of other little baby ones. So now the winds in the right and left channels move up and open the head chakra, loosening the white drop at the crown, and that melts down and comes to the heart chakra. So then you experience the white vision, like very bright moonlight in autumn, or like the almost white sky caused by the light of the rising moon when everything is covered with snow. Then the next one, the red vision, the rest of these subtle states of mind cease, our mental states, and then the winds in the right and left channels move down and open the sex and navel chakras. The last 3 are the secret or sex chakras and the navel chakra, and it opens them, loosening the knots there, and then the winds enter into the central channel. This causes the red drop at the navel to shoot up to the central channel, to the heart chakra. And now we have the red vision, like the clear red sky just before the dawn breaks, or like a copper red reflection in the sky. And then the 7th one, these 2 come together at the heart chakra, and there's like the red and the white drops meet at the heart chakra in the indestructible drop, which came from your mummy and daddy. That's there throughout our life. And then now they've come together and experience a dark vision. It's as if you've fallen into darkness, or it's like dark and empty sky, or being in a dark room. So now, finally, the 8th stage, the clear light vision, and this is the extremely subtle consciousness. All the other levels. So now the clear light vision appears. This is the subtlest level of mind, occurring only after all the grosser consciousnesses have ceased. It's like an autumn dawn when the sky is so clear, no clouds, no dust. It's not bright like at noon, not red and not dark. Nothing else appears. So the yogis continue to meditate. They've been meditating. This is the chapter that I now mention because he mentions it here. Okay, the chapter called "Death is What the Yogis Have Been Waiting For." So why, for goodness sake? It sounds so peculiar, doesn't it? Because this process is this gradual getting rid of all the grosser levels of conceptuality, the grosser levels of our sensory consciousness, the grosser level of this bag of bones, so we can get to the ever more subtle, ever more subtle, ever more subtle, ever more subtle level of mind, all the way to the 8th one. And why the yogis have been, practicing all their lives, as Lama Zopa says, to get to this stage, because this is the most potent, most subtle, most capable level of mind, which is capable of easily realizing emptiness, easily removing all the obstacles, and eventually, for some of the greatest yogis, easily can become enlightened at that point, because that's the level of mind that's most capable. It's like the microscope of your mind. It takes time to understand these concepts, I understand, So they spent their life meditating, going there through their sadhanas, as Lama Zopa says in the chapter, the way the highest yoga tantra sadhana, if you've taken highest yoga tantra like Haruka or Vajrayogini or Yamantaka or any one of these, the way the way the sadhana is constructed is linked to completely incorporating this death process, so that you can when you go through to the subtle level in your meditation, you imagine and bringing in the deity into you, and you gradually get more subtle, more subtle, more subtle. You are practicing these 8 stages. And you're practicing getting to the clear light mind. And then you are then trying to transform that into the Dharmakaya, the body's, the Buddha's body. And then when you do the next level and you manifest as the syllable, that's transforming the intermediate state into the Sambhogakaya. And then you visualize yourself becoming the deity, and that's transforming rebirth into the Nirmanakaya. So as Lama Zopa says in the chapter, these sadhanas are constructed exactly to help us train ourselves. So when the time of death comes, even if you're not a great yogi, you'll have some familiarity. And the greatest yogis, because they've got single point of concentration, can go through this in their sadhana every single day. And because the clear light mind of death is the most powerful, the best one, that's why death is what they've been waiting for. They've been training their whole life to be conscious at that level so they can get enlightened then. This is why Tantra is so quick. Musha explains it all. So now, death occurs, but for ordinary people, the yogis can stay at that point and they're conscious at each stage. They don't lose consciousness. And they can do that in their sleep, because they go from the gross and they're conscious at the subtle level, and they're conscious at the very subtle level, and they're able to meditate. I mean, Lama Yeshe was a great yogi. He would never have known. Lama Zopa talks about him. He looked like an ordinary person. He dressed very roughly. He had really rough-looking robes. He didn't act like a polite-looking monk. He didn't look like he did much practice, but he was a great, highly advanced yogi, Lama Zopa says. He had a bad heart. He should have been dead. So he had a nap every afternoon. But Lama Zopa said, of course he didn't sleep. That was his meditation. He went into the subtle stage. He had complete control over his mind and body. He meditated for 5 days after he passed away. This is what the holy beings can do. This is the training. It's the point of all the Vajrayana teachings. But ordinary people, so they are able to continue meditating at that point. And some for 5 days, Lama Yeshe for 5 days, some for 6 weeks, some for years, can stay at that point in the subtle mind. And your body won't rot. It'll get all shriveled up, but you don't rot because the mind is still there. But ordinary people, we're just unconscious. It's like we're unconscious. We have no clue what's going on. But still, because the mind is still there, that's why you leave the body for up to 3 days if you can. It's the best. We'll go into those scenarios. Better hurry. No, we've got time. That's okay. So now, so death occurs when that indestructible drop opens and your very subtle mind leaves. At that second, you are finished. You now become the intermediate state person. You now go through the reverse 8 stages and you wake up in a subtle, like a dream state, the intermediate state. You're not in this body anymore. Robina is gone. Rinpoche says you can even see your body, but this karma is completely finished. There is no interest in going back. You're over. You haven't got your new rebirth yet, but you've programmed yourself for one. It's like I think it's so funny, but the Christian teachings talk about what? Purgatory or something, don't they? Purgatory, where you clean up your mess and then you go to heaven. Or if you're in limbo like a baby, that's a difficult one, because you can never go to heaven because you didn't get baptized. That's no good. But this seems like their experience of purgatory. You've got to clean up. You're better cleaning up first, and then you're ready for heaven. That I think is similar to the intermediate state. Although you're not cleaning up anything, you're just kind of waiting around, and having very weird experiences, because we know dreams are very weird. So if it's going to be a negative rebirth, it's like total nightmare. You're like total nightmare. And if you're going to go to a Pure Land or a human birth, it's very blissful. It's a very blissful experience. So when the mind does leave, The signs of death are really important to know. This is where we go into the scenarios when your loved one dies. If you've got 3 days, that's pretty good, because they always seem to say that the mind never stays more than 3 days. But it can also go immediately. If you have a violent death, you don't wait around. Your mind's gone. A friend of mine died in a hospital. She was only young, and she had a kind of car accident, and they were waiting. The parents had said to pull the plug, and then they were waiting for the llama to come in. And then suddenly her eyes burst open, and they said her lungs exploded. And by the time the Geshe got there, I checked with the attendant by text. I said, has her mind left yet? And the Geshe said, yes, it would seem so. So that would have been a shocking experience. She was being kept alive, but then her lungs exploded. So that was such a shock for her system, her mind left immediately, So it'd be probably, and sometimes you go straight to the intermediate state, or sometimes you'll just go straight to one of the realms. There's even no intermediate state, You get a rebirth very quickly, apparently. So when the indestructible drop opens, your very subtle consciousness leaves. Your very subtle, the indestructible drop is here. That's where you began at conception. When your mind joined with this very subtle drop from the mummy and daddy's egg and sperm. So it stays there all your life. And when it opens, finally, your consciousness leaves. And it comes from the mind. Okay, sorry. The mind, what's happening here? Leaves from the heart chakra. That's very interesting. Yeah. Something mistaken here. I think I've got to fix it the next reprint. It's at the heart chakra. Yeah, right. It's at the heart chakra, but depending on the rebirth you're going to have, if you're going to be born in a Pure Land, your consciousness will shoot up from the heart chakra and leave through the crown chakra. If you're going to be born a human, it'll shoot up from the heart chakra and leave through the eyes. If you're going to get born as a spirit, which is not a good rebirth, it'll leave through the mouth. If you're going to be born in the hell realms, I think it'll leave through the anus. And if you're going to be born as an animal, it'll leave through the sex organ. That's why it's not good to touch the body, because you can disturb the mind, But it splits open and leaves the heart chakra, and instantly that second it becomes the intermediate state, and you go through the reverse process, and now you're in this kind of weird dream state, But the way the mind leaves, you can tell if the mind has left. There's different signs for checking whether the mind has left the body, meaning checking whether the mind is still at the heart chakra. So one of the ways to test is you put your hand above the heart chakra, don't touch the body. And if it's still warm there, even if the rest of the body is cold, that means the subtle mind is still there. In animals as well. But also the red and white drops, when the indestructible drop opens, the drops go on up, come out the nose or come out the sex organ, the red and the right one, depending on the male or female. You can check that as well. So now, you can be in this intermediate state. It's like sort of 7 human weeks, this experience of time, 7 human weeks. Sometimes there's more to it about that, but we won't go into details. So eventually when the new condition comes along for your new rebirth, like in our case, when our mummy and daddy hopped into bed, that's when the karma ripens between us. And then we die from the intermediate state. And they say in the text, if you're going to be born as a girl, in my case, I was a girl, the subtle mind, you leave the intermediate state, the karma ripens, and this intense attachment drives you like a magnet to your mummy and daddy's egg and sperm, but you're driven by this intense attachment to have sexual union with your father. If you can be born a girl, a boy, you're driven by intense attachment to your mother. And when you get there, that millisecond later, you get annoyed because all you see is their sex organs, and then you die from the intermediate state, excuse me, and then you enter into the egg and sperm, and that's the beginning of how we get born. So it's not the Christian, with respect, the Christians talk about it as a gift from God, not for Buddha. It's a completely attachment. The whole universe is driven by attachment. Attachment drives everything. As Lama Zopa says, it is easy to see how ordinary birth is caused by delusions and karma. That's the point about, a human birth is just the best of a worst lot, the best of a bad lot, as we say in English. So at least we need one of them. Okay, So any questions about that process first? We'll go into details about other things.
Hello, Ven.Robina. I'm going
Hello.
to read questions for you.
Good, darling.
Yeah, we have lots of questions from previous sessions and from this session.
How many altogether? How many questions?
I think it's about maybe 15 from previous sessions and about 10 from this session.
Have you organized the questions for me?
Yeah, sure. I did my best. So shall we start with this session, with the questions from this session?
No, tell me what's going on from last time. Doesn't matter.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, let me hear some of the questions. Let me just hear them. Try to summarize, but try to be accurate. Let me hear some of the questions.
Okay. So the question from the last session. Could you explain what is a Buddhist point of view on near-death experiences?
Okay, I'll do that. Continue. Tell me the other question.
So how could we help living beings in Bardo if we have connection with them?
Okay, that's fine. Go on.
So, and 2 questions about information of signs of approaching death. What are the signs of approaching death? So if somebody is going to die soon, are there any signs we could see?
Oh, the signs. Okay, let me say that one first. Yeah, I mean, if you're familiar with this process, I mean, well, first of all, I hear many nurses, especially, they say they can see the person's going to die soon. And I don't know how they know that. I don't know what they say. Unless some of you people are nurses, you can tell. But often, and I don't know either, but you just got to become familiar with this process. So you get to become familiar with it. But I mean, one of the signs, Rinpoche says, one of the signs is that if I mentioned this last week, if your eyes are open when the death process is starting, and then as you're going through it, one of the signs that you'll be stopping breathing soon is that your eyes don't blink. They stay open. That's a sign. That's one sign. Another sign, I think Rinpoche says, I can't think now, sign of death. Sign. That's one sign, and that occurs at the first stage of death, about the second of the 8. Sign. Okay, where are we? Next. Okay, the tongue. This, when the tongue gets short and thick, that's a sign as well. That's the 4th stage. So that's 2 at least. The eyes is a good one. That's the early stages of the process. That's a good sign when the eyes aren't blinking. That shows an hour or 2 before they stop breathing, but of course it could be quicker. So the next ones? I'll answer all the others. With the next ones?
Yeah. Okay, so the next one about realization, so experience like single pointedness or understanding of emptiness. So if those experiences are even superficial, is it an indication that our channels are coming into alignment and red and white into or alongside the central channel?
It's not a question of alignment. The lamas don't talk about alignment of the channels. I mean, if you've got single point of concentration, yeah, you could, that's a sutra teaching. They don't talk about channels there, but you can deduce that your mind, yes, that the airs are entering into the central channel, of course, but the tantric methods are more profound and they allow the mind to get to the subtlest level. The sutra one of single point of concentration is not capable of that, but you could argue, yes, for sure, if the grosser level of consciousness and the grosser sensory consciousness have ceased in shamatha, then of course you can deduce from the tantric point of view that the airs have entered into the central channel. It's not a question of the channels aligning. I don't know about those words. And yeah, yes, the answer is yes. Go on, next one.
So the next question is about somebody who died peacefully, but then the body was sent to morgue.
That's right.
So
we'll discuss all that. So we're going to discuss out-of-body experiences, how you help in the bardo, how you help in general after the person stopped breathing, how you can by disturbing. This is one about moving the organs, by not to disturb the body, because even if the good karma is there, it can change. So we'll discuss that as well. Go on. We'll discuss all those. Go on.
The next question: if somebody died horrible death many years ago, can we still do something for this person?
Yeah, I mean, Rinpoche is so optimistic, every level, and even if the worst thing happens, even if we're in the hell realms now, he still talks about how you can do things to help people. Of course you can. And we should be thinking like that. There's always things we can do, for sure, always things we can do. I mean, for example, one of them, I'm going to talk about it, is a practice called Zhanghua, where you take the ashes or the remains, like your nails or the hair or the ashes of your loved one. And it's a very, Rinpoche says it's an incredibly powerful practice where you bless those remains and it becomes a holy object. He says this can be incredible to help change the karma of sentient beings. Even if they died years ago, it doesn't follow logically, it will, but he's got so many things you can do to always try and help, you know, for sure. And they're all in the book. There's so many practices. Exactly. There's always something you can do. Yeah, go on next.
Okay, so how can one see future rebirth? Wouldn't that mean...
Sorry, what? Sorry,
how could one see a future rebirth? Wouldn't that mean it has already happened?
No, come on. If you're a botanist, listen, if you're a botanist, no, forget botany, come on, keep it simple. You're on a road, you're going on a journey, and you've got gross consciousness. You can only see about a few meters, can't you? But if you've got, you know, a microscope in your glasses, what do you call it, a telescope, you can see many, many, many kilometers ahead. It's exactly the same with the mind. Gross mind can't even remember most of today. Look how pathetic we are. We don't, with our conceptual mind, we don't remember 99% of today. We are a joke because it doesn't have that capability. But when you get to your subtle mind, which is what you have when you dream, that's capable of clairvoyance. When you have single point of concentration, you get clairvoyance. Clairvoyance is nothing special for Buddhism. Everybody can get it because it's the capability of your subtle mind. So as you're going through the process of death, you know, you can see the future. I mean, if you're really clairvoyant, like the Buddha, you can see 1,000,000 lives in the future. And that's not, you know, it should have happened by now. Don't be ridiculous. Because, it's, again, the botany, an example, a good example. Let's say I've never heard of the law of botany. So your question indicates you don't understand the law of karma. That's fine. Nobody does. But we're not used to thinking this way. So the law of botany is as if, let's say I've never heard of such a law. I don't know why something pops up in my garden. I have no sense that you put a seed in it and you grow it and it grows in 5 years. I've never heard of that. So you know perfectly well, if you know botany, all I see is just this, you know, a half hectare of ground. It looks barren to me, but you know exactly what you're doing. You've chosen all these beautiful seeds. You've planted those seeds. You've drawn a map of the garden in your mind. You know exactly where you want the oak trees. You know exactly where you want the roses. We all know this is normal. And then you can present to me, when I look at the bare ground, and I've never heard of botany, you can start to tell me exactly how your garden will look in 5 years. You know you can do that because you know the law of botany. And I will say, wow, you're amazing. How can you know that? Well, Robina, I just know botany. What do you expect? Karma's the same, darling. When you're clairvoyant, the more clairvoyant you become as you remove delusions, and when you become a Buddha, you can see billions of lives in the future and the past. Because everything we do sows seeds in the mind, and seeds will ripen. And so we can see the seeds we planted in the past that haven't yet ripened, but we can see if they do ripen, have all the options, what they are. This is the point. Buddhists can only really begin to help when they've got clairvoyance. This is logical. We understand this law of karma. We have to think about it. But the subtle mind has that capability. Grosser level, we can't see past our own nose. We're so thick. Go on, next question.
So the next question is about artificial insemination. How can it be explained from the Buddhist point of view?
Well, that's the interesting point, you know, when the egg and the sperm come together, different lamas say different things. Their usual explanation is when the egg and the sperm are in the mother's body. One lama I've talked to, is very clear, said, you know, you can have the egg and the sperm in the Petri dish, but the consciousness won't go there until it's in the mother's womb, or the fallopian tube, or wherever they put it. But I've heard another Geshe say something else. So they're discussing it because that's not the usual way you get conceived. You get conceived with the mummy and daddy. But usually you hear that the egg and the sperm, there's not consciousness there yet. But on the other hand, they say, and even one lama told me, yeah, even the egg and the sperm in the Petri dish can develop into what they call an embryo, and you freeze that embryo. It still can begin to cultivate, but the consciousness hasn't gone there yet. It's got to get into the mother's body, and then the consciousness enters. That's one lama I've discussed says that. What else?
So the next question is about photos from the home altar. So can we burn photos from the
I can't understand. Please forgive me. I can't understand what you're saying. Please forgive me.
Okay. Can we burn photos from
burn
the
photos.
photos from the home altar with the body in.
Sorry, what? I really don't understand. You'll have to forgive me. I'm so sorry.
Can we burn
photos of
yes
of whom?
From the home altar with the body.
From the home altar? Why
yes.
would you burn?
If somebody died, because there is a high chance they will be end up in the rubbish bin.
I don't know which photos of what?
I guess some lamas and teachers. So
why would you burn a photo of your lama? I don't understand the point. Why
because the person who owned those photos, he died.
So what? Why should you burn them?
Because there is a chance that they will end up in the rubbish bin.
But I'm asking you why you're burning them.
I don't know. It's a question. I'm just translating.
Well, no, I mean, Lama Zopa's instruction is you don't burn photos of lamas or deities. You don't burn them. You don't burn them, basically. In Tibet, they have, and some of the centers need to have this, they have a little house, they call it a tsatsar house, just a little building with no windows where you put all your old texts and your old pictures. You don't burn, it's inauspicious. You keep them and put them in this little place. So maybe you construct a little stupa in your house where you put all your old things and you keep them there holy and special. You don't burn them, is the answer. Next question.
The question about stray animals on the street, which suffer a lot, especially in the winter. So neutering such animals prevents them from having babies. Is it killing? So what is the right decision in this situation?
Well, I don't know why we have to interfere. Why do humans love to stick our nose in everybody else's business? I don't know, why do we have to interfere? You can if you like, I suppose.
The question is, they suffer a lot, stray animals.
The whole universe suffers. Do what you can with intelligence. Okay, my big answer is do what you can with your ability and your capability and your intelligence to lessen the suffering of beings. Do what you can. But honey, you can't do much. Don't be complacent. Oh, therefore it doesn't matter. You do what you can to help sentient beings. That's all. That's all I can say. Do what you can. But sometimes we get very obsessed and very narrow-minded, full of attachment for one tiny group of beings or one being. That's attachment talking. We get so tunnel vision. We'll spend $4 million on our little pussycat, because we're so attached to our pussycat, while all the rats are out there dying, agonizing deaths because we don't care, because we have aversion for the rats. So, darling, if we can see suffering beings, and every word you said is true, if you can alleviate their suffering, then please do so. Do what we can within our own capability, without going crazy. That's my broad answer. What else?
Mm-hmm. Does mortality protect one from ghosts?
Does what?
Mortality? Morality. Does morality protect one from ghosts?
Absolutely. One of the ways we suffer in this world, there are so many types of beings, and one type of being that is causing a lot of trouble for humans and animals are called spirits. They're disembodied beings who've got some strong connection with us, with places, or with the animals. And then if we interfere with them and upset their places and make them places dirty or something, they'll get upset and they cause problems. They can cause harm. They can cause us to be sick. So yeah, by practicing lots of morality, lots of virtue, and stopping harming sentient beings, then of course you prevent being harmed by anybody, including the rapist. Yes, of course you can. And as well, if you have strong faith in the Buddhas and the holy beings, they will protect you. Yes, for sure. Yes. Next.
So the next question is about suicide. So let's say somebody is very ill and thinking about killing himself to avoid pain. So
that's right.
What? Mm-hmm.
It's the same as euthanasia. It's a logical thing, not a punitive thing. The idea is, like we've just described very clearly, as well as clearly as I can, that we need to help a person at the time they're in the death process for their mind to be as peaceful as possible, which means to be virtuous. So, with great respect, not being rude about all of us, there's so much suffering. What is the reason we would kill ourselves? We're not doing it out of bliss. We're not joyful. We're not full of compassion. Our mind is not full of virtue. It's full of despair and pain and fear. This is terrible suffering. Well, when you die with that kind of mind and that kind of motivation, I'm not saying logically every time, but it's logical to deduce that if you're dying with fear and anguish and just despair and depression, that it can only trigger a negative rebirth, and you'll get a much suffering rebirth. It's not illogical to think that. So if there is a person who wants to kill themselves, all we can do is not be a policeman, but love them and take care of them and help them and make them feel even 5 minutes of their life is worthwhile. It's a whole different attitude, And the same with killing a person consciously, whether it's your dog, the pussycat, or your grandmother, same thing. And the logical reason is very simple, that you don't have the wisdom to see with accuracy that as they start the death process, which you initiated, the mouse or your grandma, that you can't guarantee, if you can't guarantee that as that death process starts, that a virtuous karmic seed will be triggered, which will ensure they get a human body, then it's no right to play Russian roulette with other people's lives. That's the approach. So you do what you can to help them hear mantras, to give them painkillers, to make them feel secure. And I'm talking about the mouse as well, and secure and unthreatened and peaceful. That's the greatest gift you can give. And then let them die peacefully. And at least then, by hearing the mantras, hearing the sounds of the Buddha, you can benefit their mind, and it'll leave a karmic connection in their mind. And that can help their mind be virtuous, and that can help them get a decent human body. That's the ideal scenario. We need to think about it. It's not that easy, We've got to look at the logical reason why it's not appropriate to take someone's life. Because the fact is, we're so familiar with the materialist view that, of course, if you kill that mouse now, you will stop its present suffering. Of course you will. But we don't have the wisdom to be sure that it'll get another good human rebirth after it dies. There's always a story I like to tell about Lama Yeshe. There was a monk at Kopan Monastery in Nepal, this is 40 years ago, who was very sick. And our friend Harry had found a doctor to help the monk. This is an example of why you need clairvoyance to help people. So Harry found this doctor to help this monk. And so he happened to mention to Lama Yeshe was Harry's guru, and he mentioned to Lama that he'd found this doctor to help the monk. And Lama just kind of dismissed it. He doesn't need a doctor, don't worry, he's fine. So Harry trusted Lama's wisdom. And so what Lama said to Harry was, it's okay, he's fine, let it be. So Harry did what Lama said. So Harry observed that the monk kept getting sicker and sicker, and eventually went up to his family. He was a Sherpa, and then he died. Well, you could think, well, how cruel Lama Yeshe was. He just didn't care. But in fact, as Lama Lundup, the abbot, told Harry, because of Lama's clairvoyance, you've got to take this as a given, as a possibility, and because of his incredible compassion, because the only reason these holy beings ever do anything is only to benefit others. There's no other reason. So because of his clairvoyance, he could see exactly the karma that this monk created was the cause of this terrible suffering. And he could see that if he'd gotten better and got a doctor, his life would have been fine. But next life, terrible, because he hadn't finished that heavy karma. Whereas by having that sickness, by dying young, he died very well. He completely purified the karma. Next life, fantastic. Now, who's got that kind of wisdom? I'm sorry. So if you don't have, basically speaking in ordinary daily life terms, if you have to make a decision about anything that could have a very serious consequence, you would never just cross your fingers and hope for the best. And you would never say, oh, well, I meant well. So meaning well is not enough, as Lama Zopa says. You need wisdom. And the wisdom here means literally clairvoyance. So we've got to be very skillful and very wise and find every way we can to help the person die peacefully. I mean, you don't just say, oh, I don't care. You do what you can. But even then you can't guarantee. We're not God. We can't guarantee. But all we can do within the limits of our wisdom is what we can to help a person die peacefully. And that's what Lama stresses all the time, Lama Zopa, in his book. And the power of mantra, the power of hearing mantras and teachings, the power of holy beings. This is huge. Even when people are unconscious, they can be aware, So that's the best I can say. What next?
Okay, the next question is about two people. So let's say one person had a really good life, never killed, never didn't steal, did everything good, but didn't die peacefully, was very scared at the moment of death. And the other guy was the opposite. So he had not very good life, but was very peaceful. Right. So what affects, more his future karma?
There's a million variations of these. It's not that simple, is it? That's a rather simplistic example. if we can understand the profundity of karma, that we have got trillions of karmic seeds from countless lives. It's not that simplistic, you know. If you've got trillions of karmic seeds. Now, if you're a person who, let's say, is due to your virtuous karma, is born as a human, and then due to your virtuous karma, you're just a nice person, but you don't do any practice. You sort of like, in other words, the good karmic seeds ripen. And then you, as we say in English, you rest on your laurels. You just feel, oh, I'm a nice person. Everything comes, money comes. I've got a nice husband. I've got good children. You've got a fairly nice personality, meaning you're a nice person, but you don't do any practice. You don't enrich those seeds. You don't live in vows. You don't grow more seeds. You don't become more generous and more loving. You just use up your past good karma. That's what a nice person is. Well, it's more than likely, if that person also has never thought about impermanence, of course it'll be a negative rebirth. That's not being unfair or fair. Karma's not a judge. It's a natural law. Equally, many of my friends in prison, for example, my Mexican gangster friends who kill people, my friend Mitchell on death row has killed people, but he's practiced all his life, you know. Some people even can have virtuous karma that's there. They've got good qualities, but they've, you know, got lots of, it's so hard to see unless we know the mind really well of that person. That's one point. But in general, for sure, you can say that if you live a good life, not just resting on your laurels, using up your past good karma, but consciously creating more by living in vows and purifying and thinking of Buddha and having a spiritual practice, then you can guarantee you will die well. Karma takes care. Karma is logic. If you've grown all your life the flowers, not just allowing the flowers to grow because they were grown in the past, but you nourish them and pull out the weeds every day, it is logical that the weeds can't suddenly pop up out of nowhere. So it's more subtle than you're saying. You have to think about it, okay? What else? What else?
So the next question is, if somebody is on heavy drugs or medication, and
on drugs.
If somebody is on heavy drugs or medication,
yes.
So how could he practice in the moment of death?
Not possible. Very difficult. Even Lama Yeshe is a great yogi, you know. He was very sick. He had a bad heart. When he was 49, he passed away, and he was he wrote to one of his monk friends, his yogi friend, and he said, these drugs they're giving me makes the mind so confused. Even he was a yogi, drugs can be a mess. So this is one of the biggest ones. You know, in our culture, we just knock people out of their brains with drugs, and we say, oh, look, they look so peaceful. Rubbish. You can medicate physical pain. You cannot medicate the mind. So if a person is drugged out of their brains to stop their physical pain, but their mind is very distressed, they'll just be having distressing dreams. So you've got to help the mind be peaceful. So it's so important to have some level of clarity, some level of awareness. That's why if you can nourish the person and love the person and support them and make them feel secure, so mentally they can be settled, then sure, drug the mind, but you have to have a good balance. It's so crucial to be conscious as much as you can. What else?
Mm-hmm. So the next question, which mantra to recite before blowing on a dying animal on the road?
There's millions of them. Lama Zopa gives so many, but any mantra you know is perfect. Any mantra you know, but Lama Zopa gives lots. He's quite skillful at choosing. He knows so many mantras. They're all in the book, so many. Medicine Buddha is always the one that people talk about. Lama Zopa says, if you want to choose any one of these practices, you know, if you do Medicine Buddha, fantastic. So Medicine Buddha is great, but anyone you know, anyone can only be beneficial, you know, for sure. The ant, the mouse. What else, darling? Any more? How many more questions?
About maybe 6 or 7.
Go on then, go.
So what is a pure land? The next question.
I'm about to talk about that. I'm going to talk about, I'm forgetting now. I'm going to talk about pure land, how to help the beings once the mind has left. That's afterwards, and including the bardo. What were those very first ones again?
What's the question?
Yeah, what were the very first ones again?
Oh, you mean
from the
very first.
The first ones you read out, yeah. What was
Could you explain what Buddhist point of view of near-death experience, and can we help beings in bardo?
I understand how to help in bardo or after breath. All the near-death experiences. That means subtle mind, how it functions. The one we just said then, what was it? What was that question just now?
What is Pure Land?
Oh, Pure Land, okay. Okay, so how many? So I'll try. Okay, just quickly hear the rest. If I can answer straight away, then I'll answer the other ones because that's part of the next stages of practice. Go on.
So the next question is, does it matter what way a person is buried? I heard cremation is the best, but...
No difference for the Buddhists, doesn't matter. Do what you like. We'll go into those practices, what to do anyway afterwards. We'll mention that once the mind has left. Go on.
Mm-hmm. So does a being in Bardo still remember who he or she was?
Well, Lama Zopa says, even the second you leave your indestructible drop, and that second you become an intermediate state, you can even see your body, but you have no interest in it. There's no recognition, no interest. Karma has completely finished. That's what he says. I hear different people say different things. I can only quote Lama Zopa because this is his book. What else?
What is the karma of infertility from the Buddhist point of view? I always thought infertility, what karma is that? So she said, I heard this is a result of killing in the past, but I read
Yeah, I know. So, I mean, if you think about I think to think of the experience of it. Like some people can't have babies, but they have no interest in having a baby. So for them, you can just say there's no, who cares, It's only, so the real question is, if you are yearning for a baby, if you're attached to having a baby, if you're desperate to have a baby and you keep trying to have a baby, but you can't, then you have to look at the experience of it. For the person who doesn't care, you could argue, who cares? It doesn't matter what the karma is. There's no real karma, just you don't want a baby. But the ones who do, it's the pain of not having it. It's the pain of thwarted attachment, isn't it? And also you could argue killing possibly, but more, I think not so much killing, but maybe, I mean, I've heard something like sexual misconduct, where more like cheating on partners, where you can't get a relationship or your relationships always leave, like your baby, if like you have many miscarriages or something, or even infertility. I mean, I'm not totally sure. I'm just trying to think of the experience of it. But it's sort of like a person who always wants to get rich, but can never make money. So they always suffer. That's the result. I mean, that's the result of attachment for sure. That could be the result of stealing because you can never get money, but you're wanting the money. Another person who doesn't get money mightn't mind so much. So it is still the karma of stealing, but it's not too much suffering for them. Like the person who can't have a baby, they don't want a baby, it doesn't matter, there's no suffering. So it's a question of how much suffering there is. And that's for sure related to attachment. Killing, I'm not sure. No, killing brings either you get the experience of killing is a tendency to kill, number one. Number two, you get killed or die young. And three, the environmental result of killing is you get sick, you get sick and get harmed, but merely not able to have a condition in which, or the other one is there's just no sentient being at this time with whom you have karmic connection. That's a simple one to say. There's no sentient being out there with whom you have a karma to come to your womb now. So that's not even like necessarily not, I don't know, it's just different, isn't it? Different things. Think about the experience of it is what I'm saying. I'm not giving a clear answer, I'm sorry. I don't think it's to do with killing. I'm not sure about that. Because infertility is just, you want something, but you can't get it, You want a baby, but you can't have one. Yeah, that's all I can say. I'm sorry. What else?
If a yogin has already reached enlightenment, why does he still need to recognize the clear light at the moment of death?
Well, I mean, they've done the job. They go through the process of dying just for our sake. They couldn't care less. They've got nothing to prove, nothing to do, nothing to say. They do what they'd like. And that yogi, if they're enlightened, they're already manifesting in a million different forms simultaneously. They're just going through the actions of pretending to be a human being. There's no work to be done. They've done the job. They just do what necessary. They just done the job. There's nothing to do if they're enlightened. They won't need to do anything. This is the way I have to say that. What else?
So the next question is, do we always get reborn in the future time?
Well, we have to define our terms, don't we? We've got conventional reality and we have ultimate reality. And ultimate reality is that things are empty. So let's look at conventional reality. I mean, keep it simple, please. We have words. We have a word called past. We have a word called the present. We have a word called the future. That's conventional reality. And we know the past comes before the present, and we know the future comes after the present. We know that. Everything we know that's impermanent is the same logic we use. A seed doesn't come before a flower. It doesn't come after a flower. A seed is the first one comes. The result is a flower. So everything is, so that's conventional reality. So then by definition, of course, you can't be born anything other than in the future. That would be a silly idea. We're talking conventional truth. It's very down to earth, simple, nothing complicated about conventional truth. We first establish what we mean by a word, and then we agree upon it, and then the laws play out. So there's no such thing as being born in the past. It's just a bizarre idea. Roses don't suddenly go backwards and turn into a seed. We know that. No botanist has ever seen that in the universal lives of gardens. So the same here. It's conventional reality. What else?
What can we say to someone who lost a dear one? How can we help?
And this is all the advice in the book. This is exactly the whole point of all this book. And this is, so this is to help a person understand impermanence. I mean, but according to the person's reality. If it's a 3-year-old child who's weeping because their dog died, you have to know the 3-year-old child's mind, don't you? If it's your grandmother whose grandchild died, you have to know your grandmother's mind. So you've got to have it's a bit like, you have to know what the person is like in order to know how to help them. One person, you'll say one thing. One person, you'll say something else. There's no fixed answer there. It's really obvious. It's according to the level and ability of the person you're talking to. So if it's another Buddhist, you know how to help them. Well, Robina, you know about impermanence, darling. It's really powerful, isn't it? It's heartbreaking. But you got to know where the person's at. So first time you just love them and listen to them. Don't give them lectures. If they ask you questions, then you answer, again, according to their ability. It's a very subtle thing to do. It's a very nuanced, it's a very wise thing to cultivate, the ability to know how to help somebody. And that starts with you having the knowledge. What else?
So if people die from mass killing, like in wars or genocide, so does it mean that they had bad karma in the past and they have consequences of it?
Well, if we understand the view of karma, that there are trillions of sentient beings, and this natural law called karma runs all sentient beings, and that necessarily every millisecond of what we experience is the fruit of an action we've done in the past. And every second of experience that we call suffering has to be to do with a negative action we did in the past. And if the experience is what we call happiness, then it's obviously the result of a virtuous action in the past. Taking that principle, the answer is evident. It's the best way to think of the big picture, because karma runs the universe. There is no being who exists outside of that law. There is no thing that grows in a garden that is outside of the law of botany. It's a natural law. Karma is the same. What else?
So it's the last question, but it's similar to what it was before. So if somebody already knows that he has a serious diagnosis and it will stop him from practicing properly at the moment of death, what could this person do during his life?
Get ready for death and keep practicing virtue and if you're a Buddhist, and keep purifying and doing all your practices, and then have people who love you, support you, to help you go through the death process, exactly as the advice in the book is. That's the idea. This is the ideal scenario to answer your question. That's exactly the point. And what's marvelous though is everybody will die, but at least if you've been told you've got death coming in advance, how fortunate you are. That actually, in our life, it's the worst thing possible to think we've been told we've got cancer, but it's actually better because we're all impermanent. We all will die, but we live in the fantasy world of thinking that I won't die, so we don't prepare for death. So how fortunate you are, and I'm not being sarcastic, that you now know finally the truth that has always been there is that you're impermanent. So now you can prepare. How incredible. It's exactly what this book is about. Now let's see other ones. Let's continue the death process and then the rebirth, and we'll answer some of those points that come along the way. So the big one that's massive is this business about the subtle mind, and the experiences of people who have these, go into a coma or near-death experiences, all these kind of things, or out-of-body experiences. Basically, out-of-body experience or near-death experience. No, near-death experiences, you go through the process. And this is the big point this doctor was making in this book, the big problem that's coming, because now people are being in the medical profession are being forced to see that that there are things like that. I mean, all over the world, there are reports of people who die. No, that's two different. There's another thing. No, it's, yeah, and there's several things here. There's near-death experience, there's out-of-body experiences, and then there's the one of dying and then coming back to life. There are three things. Okay, so out-of-body experience, near-death experience, near-death experience is when you go through the death, they're similar to the first one. You're going through this process. You would be going through this process we described. And you're seeing, which is what people report, you're seeing as you as you go towards stopping breathing, and you're seeing, the future. You're seeing a future. So it can be very joyful or it can be very scary. I'll tell you a couple of stories. But then the karma hasn't finished. So you literally come back to life. You're not dead yet. You're going through the process, but the karma to die isn't there yet. You've still got life left in your petrol tank. You've got non-killing karma in your petrol tank. So people have accidents. These things can happen. You get very serious. And I was close to death at some point. I remember I was in India a long time ago, and I got hepatitis and malaria. And I know I had some of the signs that they talk about close to death. I didn't have a vivid experience of it, but obviously I didn't die yet, Karma ripened again, and I came back to life, sort of. So that's a near death. That's like that. But out of body experience is very fascinating. Is technically, see, that's your subtle consciousness. Many people have that experience. They go here, they go there, have it in their dreams. They have it while they're on the operating table under the anesthetic. Many people report these experiences. And this man in this book, I think I told you about this. He had one chapter. He's an atheist himself. He has no views about things. He was reporting. And he said many people report these vivid experiences of floating above the operating table while they're under anesthetic, reporting exactly what the doctors are saying, what they're doing. And of course, the doctors are just cynical and say they don't believe it. What are you talking about? But he reports one particular woman who had to have such a radical operation that they practically had to make all her organs stop functioning. So from their perspective, she could not have been conscious of anything, but she reported the most vivid experience, and they can't argue with it. That's your subtle consciousness. That's your dream mind. That's the mind that dreams. That's your subtle mind, which is what you experience when your grosser level of conceptuality and sensory has ceased. Now, we know many times we go to sleep and have no memory of a dream. I've had a few operations and I'm not conscious while I'm in it, but some people are. Now, that can also happen. This is an interesting point here. That can also happen for people who have their organs taken. And I told that story. This is why the organ one is quite difficult. We've got to think about it. Many people won't experience it because this woman who said she'd give her organs, so a virtuous karmic seed must have been triggered. Lama Zopa praises anybody who wants to do this action. It's an amazing way to die, he says. And there she is, they're keeping her breathing, thinking she's dead, but her subtle mind is still there. So she's on the operating table, and they get the circular saw to cut her from head to toe to take her organs. And then the nurse monitoring the heartbeat said that the heart went from 100 to 200 beats a minute. Well, that's the subtle mind. She's having this experience of observing what they're doing. And of course, she's going to have a panic attack. Don't they know I'm dead yet? Oh my God, they're going to cut my organs out. Of course, she'd freak out. Well, that can reverse the virtuous karma and help her and cause her to get a suffering rebirth. I think next week we can talk about the stages afterwards. We haven't got any time left now. The different scenarios. But that's going to be one, and we'll go into more detail. But the one about the subtle mind, though, is very powerful. I think I told this story. Many people report that they're in a coma and they can be conscious of what's going on. I remember reading about some Italian guy. The mother wouldn't let them pull the plug. He was in a coma for 25 years. He came out of his coma and he said he was conscious the whole time. So this is not uncommon. I know I mentioned, I think, one of my first retreats, Vajrasattva retreat, a 3-month retreat soon after I became a nun. It was in 1978. And I remember we did a retreat at Tushita, and being in India in the rainy season, we had a nap after lunch. That's what their tradition is. So for a period in that retreat, 3-month retreat, my mind was very clear. And I'd have this nap. My mind I had these crystal clear dreams. This is your subtle consciousness. Many people report this. And that's what they call lucid dreaming. It's as if I was awake. It was so crystal clear. But I was dreaming. But I was conscious here. I couldn't see with this one. I didn't see things going on, but I heard everything. I could hear people talking, what they were doing, the cars coming and going at the same time as my dreams. That's not uncommon. So that the story I always tell about my friend who was in a deep coma in the hospital. And I'd go and see her in the evening, and I'd say prayers in her ear. And every now and again, I'd tell her that I'd said to her, Judy, Songsa Khyentse Rinpoche is praying for you. I've told you this. Judy, His Holiness Sakya Trinzen is praying for you. I'd ask their students to ask them. She came out of her coma after weeks, maybe months, and she said the only thing she could remember from that coma was this voice. She said, a husky voice. Didn't know it was me. She thought it was a blue lady. She thought it was a blue lady coming through the window. That was the only thing she remembered. So that's the power of holy beings. That's the power of the Buddhas, you know. And that's her subtle mind in a deep coma. So this is where if your mouse is in a coma, your grandma, you can help them even then. This is what's so powerful. This sense is the most powerful. You can't see many things. Some people can, but this one is very powerful. So many stories of people, Christian stories as well. You know, when the mind is more subtle, when you're dying, your mind's more subtle. So you're very receptive to subtler energies. This is how you can help people so much, you know. I'm sure I missed some of those questions, I'm sure. It's time to go home. We've got next week, haven't we? So make sure the questions I haven't answered, where are you? You've gone, darling. Who are you? I've lost you.
No,
Where are you?
I'm here.
I know, but there's you, Katya. But your pictures keep changing. I get worried. Thank you. So anything I haven't answered, get them next week, okay? And we just think, here we go, 2 hours, so quick, as usual, speeds by, 2 more hours, so many thoughts we've had. Rejoice in all these thoughts. Rejoice in all these seeds we've planted. How marvelous. May we nourish these seeds with our practice, with our effort, with our wish to see impermanence, with our wish to be ready for death, with our wish to help others. And then, you know, one step at a time, and be happy, delight, be happy. Chang Chub Sem Chub Rinpoche, Ma Ke Param Ke Guchi, Ke Panyampa Mepa Yang Gong Ne Gong Du, Paba Shog. That's it. All right, darling people. In Russia and in England, there's David. As David is, he pops up everywhere. David, it's good to see you, darling. Okay, you people, much love to all of you. Thank you, Katya, so much. Thank you, Anastasia. Thank you, dearest Diana.
Venerable, there is one more practical question. It came from YouTube. Someone asks, can I would like to take 8 Mahayana precepts on Lasar.
Yes, good.
But wonderful. I'm wondering, can I make them 6? Because I have to eat afternoon, and because I'm working, and also I'm sleeping on a big bed.
The bed doesn't matter. Think of the bed, just have a humble thought, because that's not so much in our culture, but to treat it with respect. But the eating one, I mean, the 8 Mahayana precepts are quite strict. You either take the 8 or you don't. So if you really feel you're going to die if you don't eat afternoon, I mean, you've got to think about, I'm trying to force you, but I think you can't, from what I understand, I can only tell you what I have received. I can't change these rules. I think you keep them, or you keep them as clear as you can, or you don't. So if you really feel you'd literally die if you don't eat a meal after noon, if you really feel that, then of course, I think you can't take. That's what I've heard. But if you want to ask other people, they might have another view, but I can't tell you anything other than what I've learned. And different lamas do say different things. I'm so sorry. I can't help you better than that. But if you really do feel you're going to die if you can't do it, I'm not trying to be ridiculous. But I think this set of the 8 lay vows, the 5 lay vows, you can select, you know. But this 8, I think you take, it's a whole ceremony. You can't pick and choose, pretty sure. But if you have anybody else you do know, please, but I can only tell you what I know. I can't be inauthentic and tell you something I think. I can't do that. All right, I'm so sorry. Thank you, sweethearts. Much love to everybody. Goodbye. I shall go now. Time to go. Katya, shall I go? Any more? Nothing more? See you next week, darlings. It'll be a flash of lightning. In 1 second, I'll see you again. Goodbye.